The following review of The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword was originally published on November 11, 2011 by NintendoWorldReport.com. This review is not revisiting a classic game. It is contemporary to the time the game was originally released, and is therefore not subject to nostalgia or preconceptions. It is being read by its original author, Neil Ronahan, and will be followed by modern commentary. Enjoy.
I've always seen the 3D Zelda games as following a clear progression, or at least attempting to. The triumph of those games is that they improved the formula over time, whether it's the leap in combat, with like Ocarina of Time being quite basic, Wind Waker adding parrying, and Twilight Princess adding even more layers, or the streamlining of gameplay, like the command melody in Wind Waker versus the Dominion Rod in Twilight Princess. Those types of improvements are integral to the latest Zelda game, The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword, which carves its own path as the next great game in the series. However, not only is Skyward Sword the next great Zelda game, it is also the ultimate proof of concept for why motion controls should exist. Simply put, Wiimotion Plus adds a whole lot to the experience that, at first glance, seems superfluous. The sword combat early on can be rough, since it requires you to be much more aware of the direction you swing the Wii Remote/sword. But the game is designed to ease you in. It gives you time to learn the mechanics and rules, clearly laying them out to you at a fine pace. Eventually, you'll be mowing down enemies at a nice clip without taking hits. It's a challenging system, especially when you have to deal with shields that can weaken and break if you mistime your parry with the nunchuck. The weapons you gain all have their own nuance to them as well. Bombs can be thrown or bowled, and Motion Plus even reads very subtle tilt, allowing you to play bowling for bokoblins. Because of the flexibility of the weapons you acquire, there are often multiple ways to solve puzzles and fight enemies. One person might use the beetle to flip a switch, while another might use the slingshot. You can use the sword to slice Deku Babas, toss a bomb at them so they eat it and explode, or fly the beetle at one to cut its stem. If you love a weapon, chances are you can upgrade it using the new forging mechanic. It's totally optional, as you don't have to upgrade a single weapon throughout the story, but the upgrades are meaningful, adding new functionality to your items. For example, the slingshot gets a scatter technique that fires off multiple seeds at once. The line between the world and dungeons is blurred throughout all of Skyward Sword. Each of the game's main adventuring areas are like dungeons in themselves, as you'll have to solve puzzles, fight enemies, and fight mini-bosses before you even make it to what older games would label a dungeon. This setup allows the dungeons to be significantly trickier and much more focused. The amount of creativity expressed in the dungeons and the overworld is wondrous. It falters at times, especially as you revisit areas multiple times and complete numerous fetch quests that sometimes feel like padding, but the game holds up very well over a 35-plus hour experience. The bosses, for one of the first times in the series, don't seem to slavishly follow the typical 3 hits to kill pattern. With the exception of a few duds, the bosses are an excellent mix of spectacle and challenge. Some highlights include a battle with a giant sea monster on a pirate ship, and a high-flying battle against a parasite-infested flying whale. The final series of bosses are suitably epic as well. The bosses are quite challenging, but if you get stuck, don't fret. Nintendo's use of the Super Guide in Skyward Sword is nothing short of masterful. Basically, you have access to a multi-layered FAQ inside of the game. Your Navi-esque character, Fi, gives you vague hints initially. Then after some time, she spells it out a little bit more clearly. And if you get really stuck, you can go back out to Skyloft and view teasing hint videos at Ashika Stone. I won't go too deep into the game's story, but I will say it does indeed link to the series as a whole. It doesn't have moments that rival the gravity of Wind Waker, but it tells a coherent story that features well-directed cutscenes and fantastic dialogue. The localization team at the Treehouse outdid themselves, as there are quite a few sly series and pop culture references. Skyward Sword is an epic, the sort of epic you call out of work or school for a few days to complete. A focused playthrough will take you north of 30 hours, and if you try to 100% the game, there is a 50+ hour quest to go through. Throw in the second quest, dubbed Hero Mode, and there is a lot of game to play here. Not only is The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword the ultimate Zelda game, it's also the ultimate Wii game. You can see bits and pieces of nearly every other Zelda game, and any game Nintendo has worked on with motion controls. From Super Mario Galaxy and Wii Sports Resort to Wii Music and Animal Crossing. If you bought a Wii, you owe it to yourself to get this game right away. After all, isn't one-to-one swordplay what made us all excited about the Wii in the first place? So that is my 2011 launch day review of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword on Wii. I gave it a 10 out of 10, as I'm sure you saw. It's a review that I've thought about a lot over the years, because Skyward Sword was a game that kind of got backlash almost instantly after it came out, whether it was people being frustrated at some of the pacing or the motion controls. For me, back in 2011, absolutely adored this game. Right now, we're doing this vintage review of it right after the remaster was announced for Nintendo Switch, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, which is going to map it to button controls where you use the right stick to control the sword swipes. And, well, I kind of don't know what to think about it as much, because since I wrote this review, I haven't finished the second playthrough of Skyward Sword. So I'm really curious to see, as I play the game, whether it's on the Wii version, if I break before the Switch version comes out this summer. Get really curious to see what I think about it now, because I think it's been nearly a decade. My game tastes have changed a lot. What The Legend of Zelda has changed a lot. But I do remember just liking a lot about this game. It has a fantastic soundtrack. I really got into the motion controls. I think the dungeons are some of the best in the series. I do really like the way they kind of layer, on each of the three areas, layering one aspect on top of another one until you kind of build to the Silent Realm sequences. It's all really good, and I like that part. And I'll admit, if you notice in this review, I do not mention anything about the sky that you can explore, because I didn't really find it to be part of the game that I cared to even deal with, to the point that's why I didn't mention it, because it was a non-factor to me. I really liked what I went through in this game, and I know that there are people out there that disagree with that. I know there are people out there that are right on the same page as me with Skyward Sword, and they like it a lot. So I guess it's just going to be really interesting, and I'm very curious to see what the changed response to Skyward Sword is. Maybe they make some changes, kind of clean up the pacing a little bit, maybe make the motion controls a little less off-putting for people not familiar with motion controls. But I do see The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword as the ultimate Wii game. And I think maybe its place in the greater Zelda canon is because people that are really into that Zelda canon might not have stuck around for everything on the Wii. They might have played Twilight Princess and then kind of pieced out and came back for Skyward Sword and were like, why do I have to do the bow like this, and why am I bowling? But who knows? Let us know what you think about Skyward Sword and what you think about this old review, or what you think of the remaster that's coming out later this year. Thanks for watching, and talk to you soon, probably more about Zelda, because it's the 35th anniversary. Might as well talk about it more.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.